Millionaire finds a young man at his son's grave. You won't believe what happens next. Why would a grief-stricken tech millionaire find a mysterious young man weeping at his deceased son's grave? And why is that stranger clutching the son's unique silver necklace? Uncover the shocking 10-year-old secret of a heroic sacrifice, a life saved, and a connection that will change both men forever. Like this story, subscribe for more powerful tales, and listen now to hear the full emotional journey. The polished mahogany desk in Nathaniel Pierce's office reflected the gray, overcast Austin sky like a still, deep pool. Spread across it were schematics for Pierce Innovations' latest venture, a breakthrough in quantum computing, but Nathaniel's gaze was distant, unfocused. October 15th, 10 years. A decade since the phone call that had shattered his precisely ordered world. The call informing him that his son, his only child, Ethan, was dead. At 58, Nathaniel was the architect of a tech empire. Pierce Innovations, birthed in a garage 2 decades ago, now occupied a sprawling campus on the outskirts of Austin, a hub of innovation that attracted brilliant minds from around the globe. He was lauded for his vision, his drive, his Midas touch in turning complex algorithms into market-leading products. He had wealth beyond measure, influence that reached into government corridors, a life curated with minimalist precision. But the core of that life felt hollowed out, silenced on a sunny Tuesday morning 10 years ago. Ethan had been 20, vibrant, restless, full of the passionate contradictions of young adulthood. He'd inherited Nathaniel's sharp intellect, but possessed a warmth and impulsiveness that often baffled his reserved father. He'd been studying philosophy, questioning the relentless pace of the tech world, talking about wanting to find work with real meaning, ideas Nathaniel had privately dismissed as youthful idealism, assuming Ethan would eventually settle into his designated role at Pierce Innovations. Their last conversation had been brief, a typical Monday night check-in. Ethan had sounded unusually buoyant, ending with, "Dad, I feel like doing something really meaningful tomorrow." Nathaniel, distracted by a pending acquisition, had murmured something non-committal and hung up, never imagining those would be the last words he'd hear from his son. The official report called it a tragic accident. Ethan's car involved in a collision with an out-of-control delivery truck on a busy downtown street. Dead at the scene. No further details seemed forthcoming. Nathaniel, numb with shock and grief, hadn't pressed. He retreated into work, the familiar demands of code and commerce a shield against the raw agony of loss. His wife had passed from cancer 5 years prior, leaving just him and Ethan. Now, only the work remained. He managed his grief like he managed his company, with quiet control, compartmentalization, and relentless forward motion. But some rituals remained unbreakable. On the 15th of every month, regardless of his schedule, Nathaniel cleared his afternoon. He would drive himself, not trusting this particular journey, to his chauffeur to the quiet, oak-shaded cemetery on the west side of town where Ethan was buried. He would bring white lilies, Ethan's favorite, their clean scent a stark contrast to the heavy weight of remembrance. Today, the ritual felt heavier than usual. A damp, clinging fog rolled in from the hill country, muffling sounds and shrouding the cemetery in an ethereal quiet. Nathaniel parked his discreet gray sedan near the entrance, the bouquet of lilies resting on the passenger seat. He walked slowly along the winding paths, the mist swirling around his ankles, the familiar names on the headstones blurring past. He knew the way by heart. Section C, beneath the oldest, gnarled live oak. As he approached the familiar area, however, he stopped, a frown creasing his brow. Through the shifting fog, he saw a figure already there, kneeling beside Ethan's simple granite headstone. A young man, perhaps in his mid-20s, dressed in clean but well-worn jeans and a faded flannel shirt. His shoulders were slumped, his head bowed, conveying an air of profound sorrow that seemed to resonate with Nathaniel's own. A surge of irritation, sharp and unexpected, pricked at Nathaniel. This was his time, his ritual, his grief. Who was this stranger intruding on this sacred space? A former classmate of Ethan's he didn't recognize? A morbidly curious visitor? He almost turned away, wanting to preserve the sanctity of his private communion with his son. But something held him back, the stillness of the young man, the palpable sense of sorrow emanating from him, even through the fog. And something else, something clutched in the young man's hand, catching the faint light. Something silver. Taking a deep breath, steeling himself against the intrusion, Nathaniel continued walking, his footsteps silent on the damp grass, until he stood just a few feet behind the kneeling figure. The young man didn't seem to notice his arrival, lost in his own quiet contemplation of the name etched into the stone. Ethan Michael Pierce. Beloved son, 1995 to 2015. The fog swirled, damp and cool against Nathaniel's face, carrying the scent of wet earth and decaying leaves. He stood silently for a long moment, observing the young man kneeling before Ethan's grave. He wasn't weeping, but the posture of his shoulders, the bowed head, spoke of a grief that felt deep and long held. Nathaniel's initial irritation softened slightly, replaced by a reluctant curiosity. Who was this person who felt such sorrow for a son lost 10 years ago? He cleared his throat softly. "Excuse me." The young man startled violently, scrambling to his feet and turning around, his eyes wide with surprise and something akin to guilt, as if caught trespassing. He was older than Nathaniel first thought, likely mid-20s, with a lean face, earnest brown eyes red-rimmed from crying, and rough, capable-looking hands. He clutched something tightly in his right hand. "I'm sorry," the young man stammered, wiping his eyes quickly with the back of his other hand. "I didn't mean to intrude. I'll leave." He started to back away. "Wait," Nathaniel said, his voice calmer now. "It's all right. You're not intruding." He gestured towards a grave. Did you know my son, Ethan?" The young man stopped, his gaze dropping to the headstone, then back to Nathaniel, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. "Ethan Pierce," he confirmed softly. Nathaniel nodded. "No," the young man said, shaking his head. "Not really. Not personally." He looked down at the object still clutched in his hand. "But he saved my life." Nathaniel felt a jolt, as if the ground had shifted slightly beneath his feet. Saved his life? Ethan? The accident report had mentioned no other victims, no heroic acts. Just a collision, blunt and final. "What do you mean?" Nathaniel asked, his voice barely a whisper. Before the young man could answer, Nathaniel's gaze fixed on the object in his hand. As the young man nervously shifted his grip, Nathaniel saw it clearly. A silver pendant, shaped like a stylized Celtic knot, hung on a broken silver chain. It was unmistakably the necklace Nathaniel had given Ethan for his 20th birthday, a replica of one passed down through Nathaniel's maternal side, a symbol of continuity, of interconnectedness. Ethan had loved it, worn it constantly. How did this stranger have it? "That necklace," Nathaniel said, his voice sharp now, demanding. "Where did you get that necklace?" The young man looked down at the pendant, his grip tightening possessively. "It was his," he said quietly. "It fell off during the accident. I found it afterwards." Nathaniel stepped closer, his eyes narrowed, searching the young man's face. "The accident? You were there?" The police report said Ethan was alone. He was in his car alone, the young man clarified, his voice trembling slightly now, perhaps sensing the shift in Nathaniel's demeanor from curiosity to intense scrutiny. But the accident, it wasn't just a collision. Not for me. He took a deep, shuddering breath, as if steeling himself to recount a painful memory. My name is Leo. 10 years ago, I was 15-inch. He paused, looking back at the grave, then met Nathaniel's intense gaze. And Ethan Pierce, he died saving me. The words hung in the foggy air, heavy with a decade of unspoken gratitude and unbearable guilt. Nathaniel stared at him, the world beginning to spin, the official narrative of his son's death starting to crack, revealing something far more complex and heartbreaking beneath. Leo stood nervously before the headstone, the silver necklace clutched tightly in his hand, its cool metal a familiar anchor against the sudden storm of emotion stirred by the stranger's, Ethan's, father's presence. He hadn't expected anyone else to be here, especially not him. For 10 years, this story, this burden, had been his alone. Now, confronted by the father of the boy who had died in his place, the words tumbled out, hesitant at first, then gathering momentum as the decade-old trauma resurfaced. It was October 15th, Leo began, his voice low, unsteady. 10 years ago today. I remember the date because, well, you don't forget something like that. He gestured vaguely back towards the city. I was downtown on Elm Street, running an errand for the group home where I was staying then. He hesitated, a shadow crossing his face at the memory of that chaotic, unhappy place he'd ended up in after his own mother died years prior. I was crossing the street, he continued, his gaze becoming distant, reliving the moment. Had the walk signal, but this huge delivery truck, it came barreling around the corner way too fast. Tires screeching. I heard people yelling. I just froze, like a deer in headlights. Couldn't move. He looked directly at Nathaniel, his eyes filled with a remembered terror. And then, out of nowhere, this guy, Ethan, your son, he was maybe just getting out of his parked car nearby. I don't know, he shouted something and just launched himself at me. He shoved me hard, pushed me clear right onto the sidewalk curb. Just as the truck, Leo choked, unable to finish the sentence, the image still sickeningly vivid. The truck swerved, trying to avoid me, I guess, but it jackknifed. Hit Ethan. Hit his car. It was chaos. He took a shaky breath. People were screaming. Sirens started almost immediately. I was just sitting there on the curb, shaking. My arm was scraped up where I fell, but otherwise okay. Alive. Because of him. His voice dropped to a whisper. He wasn't moving. Then they covered him up pretty quick. Nathaniel listened, his face pale, his knuckles white where he gripped the bouquet of lilies. He felt dizzy, nauseous. This was Ethan, his impulsive, brave, sometimes reckless son, seeing someone in danger, acting without thinking of himself. It fit. Terribly, heartbreakingly, it fit. The necklace, Nathaniel prompted softly, needing to understand that piece. After the paramedics took Ethan away, and the police were talking to witnesses, I saw it. Lying there on the pavement, near where he'd pushed me. The chain was broken. It must have ripped off when it happened. He closed his fist around it. I picked it up. I don't even know why. Everything was so confusing. I was just a kid, scared out of my mind. No one paid much attention to me, just some scraped-up kid from the group home. I kept it, Leo confessed, his voice thick with emotion. It felt important. Like proof. Proof that someone had chosen to save me. Someone I didn't even know. He looked up at Nathaniel, his eyes pleading for understanding. I tried to find out who he was back then. Asked the police, the hospital where they took me to check my arm. But I was just a foster kid. Nobody listened much. They just knew the driver died. Eventually, I gave up asking. He described the years that followed, aging out of the foster system at 18 with few resources and no family support, struggling with low-wage jobs, cheap rooming houses, the constant shadow of the accident, the crushing weight of survivor's guilt. It felt wrong, he murmured, being alive when he wasn't, especially knowing nothing about him, not even his name for years. How did you find him? Find this. Nathaniel gestured towards the grave. Internet, Leo said simply. A few months back, I was feeling low, thinking about it all again. I started searching online newspaper archives for accidents on that date, that street. Found a small article, finally mentioned his name, Ethan Pierce. Then I searched cemetery records online. Took me a while, but I found him listed here. He looked at the headstone. This is the first time I've come. Took me weeks to get up the nerve. I needed to say thank you. And I needed to say I'm sorry. Sorry that I got to live, and he didn't. Tears streamed down Leo's face now, the culmination of 10 years of shouldered grief and gratitude. He held out the necklace towards Nathaniel. It belongs to you, sir. To his family. Nathaniel stared at the offered pendant, the symbol of connection he had given his son, now returned by the young man Ethan had died to save. The neat, tragic narrative of a simple car accident shattered, replaced by a story of heroism, sacrifice, and this young man's decade-long burden. Nathaniel didn't take the necklace immediately. He looked from the silver pendant, gleaming dully in the fog, to Leo's tear-streaked face, then towards the granite stone bearing Ethan's name. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place, sharp and painful, yet bringing a strange, heartbreaking clarity he hadn't felt in 10 years. Ethan hadn't died in a random, meaningless collision. He had died performing an act of selfless bravery. He had died saving someone. That last conversation echoed in Nathaniel's mind. Dad, I feel like doing something really meaningful today. He had done it. In the last moments of his young life, Ethan had found the meaning he was searching for. A wave of emotion washed over Nathaniel, not just grief, but immense, gut-wrenching pride. Pride in the son he had often worried was too idealistic, too sensitive for the harsh world. Followed immediately by a fresh wave of grief, sharper this time, for the potential extinguished, for the good man Ethan was becoming. And then, another feeling surfaced, complex and unexpected, as he looked at Leo, a connection. This young man, standing before him burdened by guilt and gratitude, was inextricably linked to Ethan, to his final act, to his very essence. Leo still held the necklace out, his hand trembling. Please, he whispered, take it. Nathaniel slowly reached out, but instead of taking the pendant, he gently closed Leo's fingers around it. No, Leo, he said, his voice thick but steady. You keep it. You've been its keeper for 10 years. It belongs with you now. He saw the surprise, the confusion in Leo's eyes. My son gave his life for yours, Nathaniel continued softly, meeting Leo's gaze directly. That was his choice. A brave, terrible, beautiful choice. You don't owe him an apology for living. You living, Leo, that is his legacy. That is the meaning he created in his last moments. He remembered his own last words to Ethan, distracted, dismissive. The regret was a physical ache. But now, understanding how Ethan died, seeing the result of that final impulse, it shifted something within him. I didn't know, Nathaniel confessed, his own tears starting to fall again. Tears not just of sorrow, but of understanding. The reports I received, they were incomplete. Clinical. Just an accident. He shook his head. Thank you, Leo. Thank you for searching, for coming here. For telling me how my son, how he really died. You've given me a different kind of peace. He reached out again, impulsively this time, and pulled the startled young man into a hug. It was awkward at first, two strangers bound by tragedy, but then Leo seemed to sag against him, the decade of tension, guilt, and loneliness releasing in quiet, shuddering sobs. Nathaniel held him, patting his back, murmuring words of comfort, feeling less like a grieving father in that moment, and more like just a fellow human offering solace. It felt strangely right. When they finally drew apart, Nathaniel looked at Leo with new eyes. He saw the exhaustion beneath the surface, the signs of struggle in his worn clothes, the lack of direction hinted at in his story of odd jobs and solitary existence. This young man, carrying the weight of Ethan's sacrifice, deserved more than just survival. Ethan wouldn't have wanted him to live burdened by guilt, struggling on the margins. Leo, Nathaniel said, making a decision with the certainty that had built his empire, but driven now by something far deeper than profit. You said you've been alone since aging out of foster care? Where are you staying now? Leo flushed slightly, looking away. Just a rooming house, over near the east side. It's cheap. Not anymore, Nathaniel stated firmly. You're coming with me. Now, Leo looked alarmed. Sir? Mr. Pierce? I couldn't possibly. You can, and you will, Nathaniel interrupted gently, but with undeniable authority. Consider it honoring Ethan. He wouldn't want the person he saved to be struggling alone. He paused, then added more softly, the idea solidifying even as he spoke it. He saved your life, Leo, and in doing so, he left me you. You are the gift he left behind, the living proof that his life, his sacrifice mattered. Let me help you. Let me be family in his place. He saw the conflict in Leo's eyes, the ingrained independence, the fear of charity, battling with the profound loneliness and the unexpected offer of connection, of belonging. You don't owe Ethan, Nathaniel repeated quietly. But maybe we owe it to his memory to help each other live the best lives we can. He extended his hand, not in command, but in invitation. Come on, son. The word hung in the air. Son, not literally, but emotionally, the implication was clear. Nathaniel was offering more than help. He was offering family. After a long, searching moment, Leo slowly, hesitantly, reached out and took Nathaniel's hand. Together, the grieving father and the guilt-ridden survivor walked away from Ethan's grave, leaving the fog and the lilies behind, stepping towards an uncertain but shared future. Leo's entry into Nathaniel Pierce's world was cautious and tentative. Nathaniel, respecting Leo's independence and understanding the potential shock of his own wealth, didn't insist Leo move into his large, modern house immediately. Instead, he secured a comfortable, furnished apartment for Leo in a quiet complex near his own neighborhood, covering the rent and providing a generous stipend for living expenses, ensuring Leo felt secure but not suffocated. He gently encouraged Leo to talk about his life, his struggles, his dreams, however buried they might be under the weight of the past decade. He learned about Leo's quiet intelligence, his interrupted education, his knack for fixing things, his innate kindness that had somehow survived the harshness of foster care and life on the margins. He also learned the full extent of Leo's survivor's guilt, the recurring nightmares, the feeling of unworthiness, the sense that he should be doing something monumental to justify Ethan's sacrifice. Nathaniel listened patiently, offering not pity, but understanding and unwavering support. He connected Leo with a therapist specializing in trauma and grief, encouraging him to work through the complex emotions he'd carried alone for so long. He helped Leo enroll in community college courses to finish his GED, then explore vocational training or further education based on his interests, offering opportunities Leo had never dared to imagine. Their bond deepened through shared remembrance of Ethan. Nathaniel unearthed old photo albums, home videos, sharing stories of Ethan's mischievous childhood, his teenage angst, his philosophical debates, painting a picture of the vibrant, complex young man he had been. Leo, in turn, shared the profound impact of Ethan's final act, the way it had simultaneously saved him and burdened him. Talking about Ethan, keeping his memory alive between them, became a cornerstone of their healing process. It was during one of these conversations, several months after their meeting at the cemetery, that Leo revealed his secret. He spoke hesitantly, almost ashamed, about what he did whenever he managed to save a little extra money from his odd jobs over the years. "It wasn't much," Leo mumbled, staring at his hands. "Sometimes just enough for a few sandwiches from the deli near where I used to stay. Or maybe some socks or gloves from the dollar store when it got cold." He looked up, his cheeks slightly flushed. "There are these kids younger than me, mostly sleeping rough near the bus station. Looked lost, scared." He explained how he would quietly leave the food or supplies near where they sheltered, never waiting for thanks, never drawing attention to himself. Sometimes he'd buy cheap notebooks and pencils, leaving them for kids he saw trying to read or draw on scraps of paper. It felt stupid, maybe, Leo confessed, like a drop in the ocean. But I kept thinking that guy, Ethan, he helped me, a total stranger. It felt like maybe that's what he would have wanted, for someone to just notice, do something small. Nathaniel listened, deeply moved. This young man, who had so little himself, who carried such a heavy burden of guilt, had been quietly performing acts of compassion for years, driven by the memory of a stranger's sacrifice. He hadn't been trying to earn his survival. He had been instinctively honoring the spirit of the person who saved him. In Leo's quiet, unassuming charity, Nathaniel saw Ethan's idealism reflected, Ethan's desire to do something meaningful, living on. "Stupid," Nathaniel said, his voice thick with emotion. "Leo, that's incredible. That's profound." He felt a surge of pride, so intense, it almost hurt pride not just in his son, but in the young man Ethan had chosen to save. "You didn't just survive, Leo. You carried his light forward. All this time, without telling anyone." That conversation solidified Nathaniel's next decision. He had already updated his will, designating a significant portion of his estate to Leo, formally acknowledging him as family. But now, he saw a way to create a living legacy, one that combined Ethan's memory, Leo's quiet compassion, and Nathaniel's resources. "Leo," he said thoughtfully, "what you've been doing, that's not a drop in the ocean. That's planting seeds. What if we help those seeds grow? Together," he proposed, creating a foundation, something concrete, something that could scale up Leo's efforts significantly. "We could call it Ethan's Legacy," Nathaniel suggested, focused on helping homeless and at-risk kids right here in Austin, providing not just emergency aid, but real support, shelter, education, counseling, job skills. "And you," he looked directly at Leo, "with your understanding, your empathy, you should run it." Leo stared at him, speechless. Run a foundation? Him? It seemed impossible. But Nathaniel was insistent, outlining how his business expertise and funding could provide the structure, while Leo's heart and experience would provide the essential human connection. It was a chance for Leo to turn his quiet acts of kindness into a powerful force for change, to fully honor Ethan's sacrifice, not with guilt, but with purpose. It was a different kind of legacy than Nathaniel had ever imagined for Pierce Innovations, but suddenly, it felt like the most meaningful venture of his life. The establishment of the Ethan's Legacy Project marked a profound turning point for both Nathaniel and Leo. With the substantial backing of the Prescott Foundation and Nathaniel's business acumen providing the structure, Leo's quiet compassion became the driving force behind a rapidly growing outreach center for Austin's vulnerable youth. Leo, initially daunted by the responsibility, threw himself into the work with a passion that surprised even himself. His years on the street, combined with his natural empathy and the therapy that was helping him process his own trauma, gave him a unique ability to connect with the wary, often distrustful young people who sought help at the center. He wasn't just an administrator. He was a mentor, a listener, someone who understood their struggles firsthand. He helped design programs that offered not just a meal and a safe place to sleep, but also practical skills training, art therapy sessions, a nod to his own and Ethan's shared interest, educational support, and pathways back to stability. Nathaniel provided the financial oversight and strategic planning, but he deliberately stepped back from the day-to-day operations, allowing Leo the space to lead and grow. He watched with immense pride as Leo navigated challenges, advocated fiercely for the center's clients, and inspired both staff and volunteers with his quiet dedication. The center quickly became known as a place of genuine hope and practical help, a stark contrast to the often impersonal nature of larger institutions. Their personal bond deepened as they worked together, mentor and protege, uncle and nephew, father and son figure. They fell into a comfortable rhythm, sharing dinner several times a week, attending community events for the foundation, visiting Ethan's grave together, not just with sorrow, but with shared purpose. Nathaniel formally, legally adopted Leo, an unusual step for a man Leo's age, but one that felt emotionally right for both of them, solidifying their commitment as family. Leo Pierce. It felt good. It felt right. One afternoon, Nathaniel visited the Ethan's Legacy Center and found Leo sitting with a small, nervous-looking boy, perhaps 9 or 10 years old, who had recently arrived. Leo was showing the boy the silver Celtic knot necklace, which he now wore openly, tucked under his shirt usually, but brought out in moments like this. "See this," Leo was saying softly to the boy. "This belonged to someone very brave. Someone who helped me when I was scared and alone, even though he didn't know me. He taught me that even when things seem really dark, there are good people and kindness matters." He gently looped a simple leather cord, onto which he'd attached a small, inexpensive compass charm around the boy's neck. "Maybe this can remind you that you can find your way too, and that you're not alone here." The boy clutched the charm, his eyes shining with tentative hope. Nathaniel watched from the doorway, unseen, his heart swelling. Leo wasn't just providing resources. He was passing on the essence of Ethan's sacrifice, courage, compassion, connection. Later, as they were locking up the center, Leo seemed thoughtful. "I was thinking about Ethan today," he said quietly, "about how he just acted. Didn't hesitate. I hope he'd think this." He gestured around the bustling center. "Is okay. That I'm doing right by him." He looked down at the silver necklace he wore. "I just want him to be proud." Nathaniel stopped, putting a hand on Leo's shoulder, turning him to face him. "Leo," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "look at what you've built here. Look at the lives you're touching every single day. You didn't just survive. You chose to turn your pain, your gratitude, into something that helps others find their way." He met Leo's earnest gaze. "Ethan is proud of you. Immensely proud." And he added, his own eyes glistening, "So am I. More than you can ever know." He pulled Leo into a hug, a gesture that was now natural, comfortable between them. Father and son, bound not by biology alone, but by shared loss, mutual respect, and the enduring legacy of a young man's final, meaningful act. The grief for Ethan would always remain, a quiet undercurrent in their lives, but it was no longer a source of paralyzing pain. It had become fuel for compassion, for connection, for building something positive and lasting. Nathaniel Pierce, the tech millionaire, had found purpose far beyond algorithms and stock prices. And Leo, the boy saved by a stranger, had found not just a family, but his own heroic path, ensuring that Ethan Pierce's legacy wouldn't be just a name on a headstone, but a living, breathing force for good in the world.